We want to welcome our listeners and viewers back to Theologically Speaking for a special episode this time. And that's because here at BJU Seminary, we are hosting the annual Bible Faculty Summit. And our listeners, our viewers may not be familiar with that, but we want to let you know about this event that goes on every year, and it rotates from school to school, seminary to seminary. And for many years now, it's been a wonderful opportunity to fellowship with like-minded Bible professors and other folks connected with theological education, and just to hear their research and just build each other up in the calling that the Lord has given us. And so today, to talk about that, I have two Marks. First of all, I've got Mark Sidwell, Dr. Mark Sidwell. We have recently had a conversation because Mark has recently retired, at least partially, from the university. And he is a valued member of the history faculty and also has helped out at the seminary with our church history courses. And so he's here to talk about the history of the Bible Faculty Summit, BFS, and just share some of his experiences. And then we have another Mark, Dr. Mark Ward, who is one of our PhD graduates. And Mark has served the Lord in different capacities and now is dedicating himself largely to a YouTube and internet type ministry. So I'd encourage our listeners to check out his YouTube channel, Ward on Words, if I got that right. So a lot of great content, a lot of which has to do with Bible translations, but he deals with other subjects that I know will be very helpful to folks who can check that out. So I want to start with Dr. Sidwell, as he has been involved with this event from the very beginning. If you could talk to us about the history of the Bible Faculty Summit, why was it started, how has it developed through the years, and really what's this all about?
All right. This is actually the 30th year. 1995 was our first one. And I was actually kind of a side participant. Back then, I was still on staff at the university, and Dr. Thurman Wisdom stopped me and said, "We're having this thing on campus." He didn't call it a thing. Why don't you come and join us in here and sit in on sessions as well? So I was able to go to a good many of them. And so basically, it's a couple of days of presentations of scholarly papers, research, that sort of thing. The idea, apparently, both Bob Jones III, who was president back then, and also I believe Detroit Seminary had a similar idea. And they got together and said, well, let's just do it. And so over in the old library classroom, which is now a computer lab, we were all in there for a couple of days of listening to papers, presentations. In fact, there are some people here who were there at that first one, like our dean, Neil Cushman, gave one of the presentations at that first conference then. And it wasn't, I think it was really intended as a one-shot thing, but they basically liked it so much, they said, let's keep doing this. And so other schools began to host it, and we began from year to year to go to visit. And it was really my first major avenue for presenting research and scholarship that I had worked on here, and I've always appreciated it because of that.
Oh, that's great. So that was what year again?
1995.
1995. So this is kind of an anniversary year, I guess, and it's been great to see how it's expanded and has touched so many different people from different perspectives and institutions. And so Mark Ward is now the president of BFS, and you've been in that role for 2-3 years now?
Actually, I think it's been like 10.
Really? I did not remember that.
There wasn't a formal accession or inauguration ceremony.
Okay.
I was just kind of left holding the bag when Jeff Straub stepped aside from the role.
So thank you for continuing that leadership role. You do a great job organizing and motivating. So could you share what is your vision for BFS?
Yeah, well, being in the PhD program here, I graduated in 2011. That was my formal ending. I walked in 2012. And I absolutely loved it. I think, of course, that education had a massive shaping effect. That was the whole intent. I think I was given all the things that I wanted, and that was a tool belt full of exegetical tools. I wanted to be able to look at Scripture and use the very best available, humanly speaking, of course, and reliance on the Spirit, tools to make sure I understood what God says in Scripture. But one of the areas that at the time when I graduated wasn't really a strength for us. We weren't doing a lot of publishing. We were kind of starting some initiatives at that point.
Sure.
Biblical Viewpoint was either on its last legs or had died, and that was before the Journal of Biblical Theology and Worldview had arisen. So I came to feel that there were a lot of gifted people, and at that time I wasn't thinking of myself. I was thinking of my professors and fellow students, some of whom are now at the summit, and thinking, to use King James language, perhaps ironically, our lamps are being kept under bushels. Here are a lot of learned young men especially, who can write great book reviews, who have excellent thoughts on this or that theological or biblical topic or church history topic, and yet their voices are not being heard. So therefore, the gifts that Christ has given to his church through them, Ephesians 4, they're the teachers of the pastors and teachers. Those gifts are, again, lamps under bushels. And so I have done various things over the years to try to encourage the people I respected and loved so much, my teachers, including both of you at Bob Jones Seminary, to find opportunities for writing. And when I worked at Lexham Press, I was able to make some opportunities there with some projects. Also Bible Study Magazine there at Logos Bible Software. I was eager and happy to have writers that, used to teach me. And as I've come into more writing myself, and my, peers have done so, like Brian Collins and Joel Arnold, I've not only wanted to give them opportunities at places like Lexham, but I saw that the summit was kind of like a hothouse for that kind of work, that if we, that is schools in the basic orbit of Bob Jones, similar to its spot on the evangelical spectrum, we had, I think, a similar tendency to have our lamps under bushels. And if we could get together and encourage one another, provoke one another to the very specific good work of working hard on scholarly writing to bless the church, that we'd actually do more of it. And I definitely have seen that to be the case. I helped start a publishing committee, kind of meets informally every year. We'll just talk about what are the best papers and who are some folks that we could talk to and encourage, hey, you should submit this paper to such and such journal. And Paul Himes is a member of that committee, as probably the most published as far as journals go, member of our group. And he actually keeps a page on the Bible Faculty Summit website noting how many summit papers have now been published. That's the point. The vision for the group is the slogan, educators promoting scholarship in the service of the church. And if you don't actually publish any of what you write, it's not that there's no service, because we are shaped by our own work on various topics and we give it to our local churches. But I don't think that's why you get a PhD. I think you're trying to bless more than just your local church through parachurch and other type ministries like the Bible Faculty Summit. So we've been able to bless the church through many papers available in various places around the world now.
That's great. That's a really good overview of what this is about and your heart for it. And I wanted to drill down a little bit, even in that blurb that you gave about scholarship in the service of the church. Okay. So I wanted to ask about that, but let me frame it this way. It seems like in that whole realm, if we just think about our own slice of Christianity in this country, there are kind of two dishes that we can fall into and probably have fallen into. On the one hand, you have anti-intellectualism and just the concern that we could go to seed on all this very technical kind of study and lose our heart for the lost, our heart for evangelism, our heart for practical Christian living. So there's that side of it. On the other hand, we recognize that we depend on truth, and our mission is flowing from the scriptures. So we want to give attention to it. But there is a genuine concern that this could kind of overtake. And so how do we navigate that space between anti-intellectualism and yet the over-elevation of scholarship on the other hand? And I think about our own tradition here at the university, which is, has always wrestled, I think, with, how we're going to keep all this going. So on the one hand, you have our founder, Dr. Bob Jones Sr., who was all about borrowing brains because he
Right.
recognized that he was an evangelist, not an educator. And so he was very active in the founding of the school and hiring people with the credentials to cover the different subjects. But at the same time, and Mark can correct me if this is apocryphal, but I remember hearing the story of how he would say, every time a faculty member gets a PhD, we need to stop everything and have a week of revival meetings, right?
I've heard that. I've also heard it credited to Dr. Bob Jr., but
Okay, right. So, but you understand the sentiment and
Yeah.
the struggle there. So, how do you respond to that, particularly on the aspect of that scholarship can have a negative spiritual effect on the church?
Well, my calling for the last, especially 5 years, up until the end of 2024, I felt I was called by the Lord to engage against King James onlyism. And I stood in absolute continuity with things I was taught literally in this room here in the seminary. I feel I'm continuing a mission that many Bob Jones folks, especially Stuart Custer, have contributed to. I was just taking it to a new generation and in a new medium that is YouTube. And one of the ways that, you find out quickly, if you really want to persuade people, you have to love them. And if you really love them, you're going to listen to them. And if you're going to listen to them and really listen to them, you're going to have to acknowledge when they have a point to make. And I think, yes, generally, King James onlyism is known for its anti-intellectualism and not the reverse. But is there any legitimacy to their concern? I have to say, absolutely there is. And it's exactly what you've named. And so the answer cannot be, well, then let's ditch scholarship because somebody's going to have to translate the Bible for us. And necessarily you're going to rely on scholars or you're going to be one yourself. There is no way around it. God has set up a system in which the only way to get his word to you in your language, given that there are no native speakers left of biblical Hebrew or of Koine Greek, is if somebody does the hard work, years of hard work to learn these languages and translates them for you. So we know that there's a practical necessity.
Sure.
How do we move forward? What I've always said is a couple things. Both sides have to clothe themselves with humility. If you find yourself echoing what I hear the King James onlyists say all the time, and that is that scholarship is in itself wicked, really, because it is necessarily prideful, that's clearly wrong. God has not allowed us to do that. Not only has he said in Ephesians 4 that he's given teachers to his church, but again, he's set up this system, this world in which somebody's got to translate the Bible. That involves scholarship. He's also given scholarly gifts that do so much good. And that actually brings me to the other side. The other side have to clothe, we have to clothe ourselves with humility. We're sitting here, we're doctors, right? We're the ones, anti-intellectualism is not our problem. It's the opposite. We have the other temptation. So we have to not only maintain lives of piety, but when it comes to our own humility, clothing ourselves with humility, when we speak to a King James onlyist or anybody who's skeptical of our education, I've always felt that we have to give so much good to other Christians that it defeats their objections. So that's what Mark Minnick did for me, right?
Yeah.
I came from a King James only church. I was primed to hear and listen. I wasn't super skeptical of scholarship, but I also didn't really realize that what he was doing was scholarship and relying on scholarship. For me, it was just, he's feeding me God's word. And over time, whatever objections I might have had to biblical scholarship, faded away as I saw the fruit of it being literally fed to me week by week. So if both sides will clothe themselves with humility, we can move forward. I never want to dismiss the concerns of the anti-intellectualists. That is, there are ditches on both sides of the road, or if you want to think of the slippery slope analogy, there's only one pinnacle and you can fall to any side, really, right or left or back or front. Then the last thing I'll say is I'm pretty sure I was assigned here, probably in systematic theology, that famous Warfield essay, The Religious Life of Theological Students. And I know many of my fellow students around that time continue to quote it. And I have thought of it so many times. Why do you have to oppose prayer and study? Why can't you pray while you're studying?
Yeah.
And I was alert to this problem as I entered the world of evangelical academic biblical studies. And I have really felt that there's never been a moment of my addressing God's word, no matter how technical I've gotten, when I've forgotten this is the word of the living God. And I was taught that by Bob Jones. I was taught to unite head and heart. We put the red carpet on the sawdust trail. And I'm grateful for the legacy, the heritage that I have of deep piety and love for the Lord and love for the lost, along with doing as best you can to honor that old Princetonian tradition through Charles Brokenshire and others that came to us, of working as hard as you can with your intellectual gifts as well.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And I think that even having that statement for the church in the mission statement keeps that front and center. You know,
Right.
I've been sitting here listening to the papers this week, and some of them were pretty technical, have been, but I can see the practical value and help for each one, you know, some contribution that's being made. And, you know, I believe the heart of all the presenters has been to actually help the church. That this isn't just a kind of an in-house ivory tower conversation, but it really is outward focused on how we can edify God's people. So we certainly want to keep that emphasis. Mark Sidwell, what are some of your highlights of being involved in this through the years? How do you think it's helped your ministry? And if you wanted to comment some more on all of this about intellectualism and whatever, just feel free.
Sure. Well, I thought back through the years of doing this, and how it has actually meant a lot to me as an outlet. I remember the very first one, I was simply, as I said, a staff member who was sitting in. I remember Dr. Roland McCune of Detroit Baptist Theological Seminary was doing a presentation, and in this he referred to, and as Mark Sidwell has written about this particular thing, which something I'd done in our old journal, Biblical Viewpoint, and I thought, somebody noticed me. You know, and I really, at that point, I hadn't done an awful lot then. I was trying to move my way into scholarship. And the fact I thought, hey, we are actually looking at and reading each other's material. I was thinking of that in some of the presentations we've heard this week, the footnotes from people who are here in this group and we're reading and supporting each other. But I think through the years of the opportunity that it's been for me to be able to research topics, especially before I actually didn't start teaching till the early 2000s. And so at one point, writing for our old journal and doing these conferences was my outlet for doing that kind of work, that kind of focus. And I got into teaching, and they all came together in teaching too. They support each other. You know, I might mention like one thing, a value I've seen. I did a paper a number of years ago on the Jonathan Edwards philosophy of history. Later, we turned it into an article for our journal, in fact. Now, I have never actually got up and lectured for an hour on the philosophy of Jonathan Edwards, but that has shown up maybe 5 minutes of a lecture here somewhere. And when Jonathan Edwards comes up, I bring in, and part of his biblical worldview was his philosophy of history. And as I thought myself about forming a philosophy of history, how you preach it, how you approach it, I think back, now what has Edwards said about this? It enriches you and gives you more that you can then give to others. And it can show up in the classroom, in Sunday school, even conceivably in a sermon as you're talking about these sorts of things. So it's had that constant, and of course the whole iron sharpening iron of us meeting and talking with each other and getting to know each other. In fact, I was a little bit sad. I was talking to somebody from Faith Baptist Bible College about, I remember the Houghtons used to come, George and Myron. I guess Myron's with the Lord now. And George is still alive, but getting elderly here. But, you know, the friendship and the interchange and the humor for those men especially. There's so many happy memories about that and how we helped each other just in making connections and letting us all know that we're all out there. I mean, there are other scholarly forums. I mean, you could speak at Evangelical Theological Society or Conference of Faith and History or something, and that's fine. But to have the theological closeness that we have as we talk and meet with each other, that adds a certain value to this interchange I don't think you'd get elsewhere.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. And I think too of the diversity that's within the unity, right? So it's very tempting when we're focused on our own institution and our own distinctives to kind of put our heads down and just do our thing as though we're the only ones. And if it comes to talking about so-called sister institutions, it's very easy to have stereotypes and to misunderstand their perspective, their heart, and maybe not speak as positively as we ought to about them. when we come to something like this, we intentionally are trying to interact with people that are associated with different schools and different perspectives. So like this week, most of us would probably be Baptistic and dispensational of some stripe, but we have Reformed Baptist, we have at least one Presbyterian and others who have come through the years, and various other nuances in the constituency. And I found that very, very healthy, just to be exposed firsthand to somebody that doesn't see things exactly eye to eye with me, but to interact with them as people, not just as a writer or somebody with some other school. And I think there's been great value from that as well. Well, maybe Mark Ward could just talk about the nuts and bolts a little bit. How is it that the papers are chosen that are going to be presented? Maybe talk about some of the papers that are being done this year so our listeners can have an idea of what's going on. And maybe from all of your years, there have been one or two that have stood out that have really been helpful and formative for you.
Yeah, the papers are chosen via the committee.
Okay.
And I've tried to make sure that the committee represents the largest and strongest, but also like most committed institutions that supply faculty to the summit. Mm-hmm. And usually that means they also host the summit. So the summit travels from school to school year by year, and each school handles room and board for everybody. So you only have to do it once every 7, maybe even 10 years. It's not a massive expense that way. And it's just good for us to see each other's place of work and service. The committee right now has people from Central, and did we lose our person from Detroit? I'm trying to think this through now. From Bob Jones, certainly. Phil Brown from God's Bible School and College. He's just brilliant, and I wanted him on the committee. We've got some really good participation. Oh, Corey Marsh from Southern California Seminary is a relatively new addition to the group. He's got a lot of energy he's brought. And we don't do blind review. I think if we were to get larger, and I kind of hope we don't, honestly, I kind of like the small size so we all hear all the papers. That's a value of it, as opposed to ETS, which is great, but there's 1 million people there, 5,000. So you can't all listen to any given paper. I like being forced to listen to stuff I might not choose at ETS. Right, it's actually really healthy for me. But so we don't do blind review, but we just try to get the very best presentations we can. My good friend Todd Jones, who's a music minister at Morningside here, he told me about music one time. He said, if you want to have quality, you have to have quality control. So we do say no to people. Yeah. And there are some individuals who we're very skeptical of their presentation, their proposals, because of past papers that maybe didn't do so well. And if we're going to consider them, we have to talk to them first. We have to work with them. But normally there are at least 3 up to even 10 proposals that we turn down, and we keep anywhere from about 14 to 17 of the proposals that seem strong. That's how they are chosen. I also try to have a mix. I like having a church history guy or two. That's one of our smallest amounts of contribution, year by year, but it's always enriching and helpful. I try to, spread things out. And I also have people volunteer every year. Hey, I go every year. If you need me to step down and give someone else my slot, I can do that. Mm-hmm. So it's a organic and more family-oriented kind of methodology rather than a very formal one. Sure. Which is what I think you have to do when things get bigger. About the papers that have kind of been helpful for me, I want to say the same thing that Dr. Sidwell did. Dr. Sidwell used to be my boss actually at the Fundamentalism File here, and he introduced me to the summit by handing me his papers to copy edit for him, which at that time as a young and 20-something GA was a great honor to me, really enjoyed doing. I actually benefit most from my own papers. Sure. And what that means is I put 20, 40 hours into studying and writing on a particular topic. Of course, I'm going to remember that even more than I remember other people's papers. And it's just like you said, it pops up in Sunday school. It's 5 minutes in that lecture. It pops up in blog posts and articles that I write. It informs me for just anything I produce. Of course, videos on YouTube now. I try to pretty much anything I write goes out on YouTube anymore. YouTube is a content maw, M-A-W. So that's my main benefit. But then I definitely have enjoyed papers. I wrote some down. Paul Himes is somebody I really enjoy because he's linguistically oriented. Glenn Kerr, I really enjoy his stuff because he's a Bible translator, even though I often disagree a little bit because he's a little more like majority text oriented than I am in textual criticism. I'm just always stimulated by his papers. Paul did something testing the theological conspiracy theory, utilizing Jude as test case for heretical Alexandrian and suppressive Orthodox positions on deliberate corruption and textual transmission.
Wow.
And that might sound daunting, but it actually really stemmed from one simple but profound insight, and that is that at this one place in Jude 5, it says either the Lord or Jesus rescued the people from Egypt, something like that. And it's actually the critical text rather than the Textus Receptus that has the more orthodox reading, the one that accords more honor to Jesus. And he was bringing that out. And I have profited from that. I had him on my channel. Tim Miller, who's been at Detroit and at Shepherd's, did a paper on the qualifications for ministry that I found really helpful and practical. That's a question you have to face in ministry for yourself and for others. He did one on textual criticism in the pulpit. That was memorable. I really love good writing, and I really love it. So when somebody sparkles with a little wit, I like Kevin Van Hooser's writing for that purpose. Some people find it a little much, like I find G.K. Chesterton's. But we have some writers, and recently Andrew Goodwill last year, and I pulled this up, he used a phrase that just gave me so much joy. He said, familiarity with biblical narratives may not breed contempt, but it may breed flannel graph midrash, like the negative view of Elijah in 1 Kings 19. I just thought that is totally brilliant. Yeah. And I had to go up to him afterwards and thank him for that. The Lord has given some real gifts to these folks. And I'll mention just one more. I feel awful not mentioning everybody, but Tim Little is somebody I enjoy. I don't always fully understand because he's digging really deep into the literary aspects of Hebrew, and not just Hebrew, but poetical Hebrew in the Song of Songs. But because he's language oriented and so am I always find those really energetic and stimulating. I said one more. Joel Arnold has been working on what's the role of cultural backgrounds, what it ought it to be when we interpret Scripture. So, I hope you can see, viewers out there, this is very practical. Somebody's got to answer that question because it's coming up a lot. Do we get to say that our discoveries of ancient Near Eastern texts get to revise massively our understanding of Genesis 1 through 11? Well, I think my answer is no, but I need some help with that sort of thing. I think biblical scholarship is nothing if not practical for the church, is at least as practiced here at the Summit.
Those are great examples, and I wonder if Mark Sidwell could throw one more in. Earlier today, you read a paper that is on a topic that, probably the average person or scholar has never thought about. So can you explain what that was about, and with that, how you think that is helpful to the church?
Yeah, I did a paper on agency in the conversions of African Americans in the Great Awakening, which sounds very technical. And it brings a couple of things together. The Great Awakening was the first time that we had a larger number of Black Americans, mostly slaves, join the church, come to the church, be converted. And the question is, why? Well, I got the suggestion from a note in Albert Raboteau's book on the Invisible Institution about the slave religion, slave church, that agency is a big thing. And agency basically is that not that you are always acted upon, but you have the ability to act yourself. And this is actually an issue in Black studies in general, not just church history, theology, and so on, recovering the idea that Black Americans had a place in shaping their lives. I used the example from Genovese's book on Roll, Jordan, Roll. The subtitle is "The World the Slaves Made." They made a world for themselves. They were not just oppressed, but they responded, and so on. And so the idea of agency is instead of being nurtured through catechism like children and brought to conversion, hopefully, which wasn't being very successful actually, you present them with the choice here of you must choose, you must hear the gospel, you have the ability. Theologically, I'm oversimplifying here, but is being presented with you with the choice. And so therefore, the fact is that Black Americans began to respond to that way as being treated like individuals and adults, and even in the presentation of the gospel. Now, what's the value of that? Well, one thing, it opens up a little bit more of our knowledge here. It shows how the history of the church reflects this particular trend in African American studies. But also, to me, the whole topic of African American church has been a long-term interest to me. And what it brings to us here is the fact that the Black church in America is very evangelical in its theology and worship, very focused on conversion, very focused on revival. The majority of Black Americans are Methodist or Baptist, for example. And it kind of reinforces the idea that there's a theological similarity, a theological fellowship between kind of put white evangelicals and Black evangelicals. That wasn't practiced. And the reason for that was not because of what the Black church was doing, because of the attitudes of the white church toward them. So it's kind of to recover this and nourish this and create a racial understanding among Christians who are of similar views. They have the similar kind of history. So that's why I'd like to bring out here, to promote that idea, to recover the story of the Black church and what we have in common with it.
That's a great emphasis. So practically speaking, both of us go back to the Great Awakening, under God.
Yes.
That was what he used to create so much of evangelical, Bible-believing Christianity in this country.
And in fact, the Black church, considering numbers, percentages, actually owes more to it than the white church in America in general.
Yeah. So that really is a very positive perspective that encourages a spirit of appreciation, across the differences. So thank you. Very good. Mark, you mentioned about the opportunity to publish. Where does that stand, or what are your next plans?
Corey Marsh from Southern California Seminary has started a monograph series there, and we're hoping to use the best 5 to max probably 7 papers of each summit for the next 3 years to put together a monograph on the relationship of biblical theology to the other disciplines.
Okay.
Corey's got, like I said, a lot of energy. I'm really grateful for the work that he's done on this. That's the main opportunity. But then anybody can, use their summit paper to try to get something published in a journal as well.
So you're saying the first volume for this year will be on biblical theology, or is that kind of an ongoing?
It's for the next 3 years, we're hoping to grab as many as 5 or 7 from each summit to collect together into this monograph.
I see. Very good. Well, we look forward to that coming out, and that will make more broadly available the fruit of all of this to people who would be interested. And you have a website for the BFS. People can go there. What is the? BibleFacultySummit.org. Okay, so very easy to remember, and y'all can look that up and get more information. Do you guys have any other final observations about the summit, about scholarship, just whatever you would like to encourage our listeners with?
I'll just mention, for anybody who made it this far into this interview, you can have the password for the papers at the summit. It's BFS, lowercase BFS.
Okay.
Otherwise, I keep them behind there just in case people want to publish.
Sure.
But I'd love for people to read the papers straight off the website.
Okay. And there's a separate link for the 2025 papers, and the code is BFS. All right. Very good. Any other reflections here before we close as to the impact of this on your lives? All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been a rich time so far. We still have one evening and one more morning of papers. And then y'all are probably already planning for next year, I suppose.
Yes, I found out we're probably going to be up in the beautiful state of Minnesota for next year.
At Central Baptist?
That's likely, yes.
Very good. Well, thank you again for your energy, your heart, your input into this ministry. I think it really has had the effect of strengthening the bond between like-minded believers and then giving us all this practical help of the actual papers that have been presented. And thank you, listeners, for joining us, and we look forward to our next time together for Theologically Speaking.